Melissa, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. We'll just start on over again. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Melissa Keller, and I work with the Department of State, and I'm joined by my colleague, Susan Landfried. In support of the decarbonization component of the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, our partners with the NORESCO team are offering the series of informational webinars on each of the decarbonization compliance path options. So this session will cover third-party certifications, and we are joined by Michael Goodrum and Michelle Hendrick with the NORESCO team, who will be leading us through this compliance path. Before we get into the presentation, we have just a few housekeeping items. As you might have heard at the beginning, we are recording this presentation, and the recording and PowerPoint presentation will be made available to attendees after the presentation. Once we go through the presentation, at the end, we've reserved some time for questions. But if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to note them in the chat box. And then afterwards, we'll go through any questions we've received. And we'll also ask participants to raise their hands to ask any additional questions. And with that, Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. So, Michael Goodrum with NORESCO, and we are one of the consultants supporting teams in the DRI and New York Forward programs with decarbonization and decarbonization compliance. We are an energy service company that does energy efficiency retrofits and also sustainability consulting, including green building certifications. And my colleague Michelle Hendrick is here to walk us through a lot of the details of that. I'll give some overview of just compliance for decarbonization within the program, and then she will go through the details of a variety of third-party certifications that are available.
And as Michael had mentioned too, our agenda for today will be the certifications overview, summary, and then at the end for the questions. So. All right, Michael.
Okay, so like I mentioned, well, actually, as Melissa mentioned, we are going through reviewing each of the compliance paths within the DRI and New York Forward programs. I've had other webinars covering the other two paths. This one is covering path 3, which follows third-party certifications that demonstrate decarbonization. The other paths, those webinars are also recorded. If you didn't attend, you can also go find those to learn more about each of those paths. And there are some certification programs that won't necessarily be covered in the presentation today that we may consider on a case-by-case basis. We're trying to cover some of the most common ones, but if you have another one that you know of or are considering and want to bring it to your DOSPM and to the NORESCO team, we're happy to discuss that. So as I mentioned, NORESCO is part of a consultant team that's supporting the decarbonization efforts within the program. We're leading the team, and along with NORESCO, we have River Architects, who have a lot of expertise in building envelope and the Passive House certification. They've also conducted a lot of research related to funding available from NYSERDA and also some utility programs, and can provide insights on that for project sponsors. We have Cartman Consulting. They specialize in the New York State Energy Code and the New York Stretch Code. They led a session actually earlier today covering the Stretch Code. Also energy modeling as it relates to compliance with the Stretch Code. And then Savin Engineers, they are a multidisciplinary engineering firm who have experience with design and construction for energy efficiency and decarbonization projects, and can provide insights related to the design and construction of projects. A quick overview of the compliance path options, just to remind everyone. There are 3 paths, the first being to meet New York Stretch Code. As I mentioned, we have a separate webinar that covered that. it's approximately 10% more efficient than the state's base energy code. You can follow via prescriptive improvements for specific items within a building, meeting certain like R values for insulation or lighting power densities, things like that. You can also follow a performance-based path demonstrating energy performance of your building with an energy model that at or better than code. The second path, Energy Star, is achieving an Energy Star score of 90 or better using the EPA Target Finder software online. This use, you would also model or simulate your building's energy use and put in some other basic information to generate a score. And then it's scoring your building against other buildings like it in your climate zone. So it's, sort of comparing you against your peer buildings. And then today we'll be focused on the third-party certifications path 3, which is following one of various third-party certifications that are out there. Like I mentioned, we're going to go through some of the more common ones today and give some more details on them. If there are ones that you have that aren't listed or that we don't talk about, we're happy to discuss those with you.
Right.
And as far as which path works best, I'm sure that's why folks are on the webinar, is to better understand. We'll focus here on the third-party certifications. So if you're already considering it, or if it's something you think that'll add some distinction to your project, that's probably a good reason to look at path 3. Or if you have something like ESG reporting that may give you credit for it, that's another reason. As we'll talk about going through each of these, there are added costs for registration. Some of these you may need a licensed professional or an accredited professional to certify, or you may even have additional testing or inspections. We'll talk through the details of those as they relate to different programs. And at this point, I will turn it over to Michelle, and then she will get into the details of these different certification programs.
Thank you, Michael. So as you had mentioned, we'll be focusing on that path 3 option for the third-party certifications. As many of you know, the certification options are really dependent on what is your project's overall goals, what the overall schedule is, and what those priorities are. If the priorities like a schedule-based budget, occupant health, or energy reduction, that can help streamline which approach could be best for your project. With most of these certification pathways, a consultant is recommended just to be kind of that gatekeeper and to really help facilitate those next path forward, and to really provide a gap analysis and a framework of how to incorporate strategies within your project. So as a reminder too, on path 3 option, the required documents are going to be a proof of registration of that third-party certification, your preliminary scorecard, and then an outlined pathway of strategies on how you're going to achieve that certification. The actual final documentation and approved certification does not need to be provided at this time. And so hopefully with that, this will allow the team to start to apply for grants earlier in the process. If it is a new design project, that you could do it earlier rather than having to wait once a project has been certified. So as we kind of go through these slides, I do want to just keep in mind that we have provided a high-level overview of these different certifications, but then also we have just a high-level fee table or schedule for projects, primarily for new construction projects and under that 50,000 square foot projects. All of these fees, just please keep in mind, we do have these active links in here that you can reference that would best fit your project, but please keep in mind most of the time There's a registration cost with most of these, plus a certification cost. And those certification costs are typically by square footage base or project size or scope based. And there are also available discounts depending on different market sectors. For example, if you're a nonprofit, charitable organization, small business, schools, government buildings, healthcare facilities, affordable housing, and then also assisted living facilities all can have discounted rates than potentially what we see here on the screen. So just wanted to also, with these certification fees, that does not include any like additional consulting fees or the design team members or construction team member fees. So just strictly the fees based on certification. So as we get started, we are going to be starting with LEED. So most of you have probably heard of LEED. It is the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design rating system, and it was established and developed by the United States Green Building Council, or the USGBC, about 30 years ago. And it is probably the most well-known in the United States and worldwide of a green building rating system. Most of the framework from LEED has been the foundation to more recent building codes that we're all starting to see and use, as well as best practices and procedures today. LEED has several different rating systems that can address across several different market types. So really it's broken out into your whole building certification approach, looking at it from a building design and construction. So looking at those new construction, major renovation projects, pour shell, and those kind of all can, the market sectors can include multifamily, offices, schools, retail, hospitality, healthcare, warehouse, etc., airports. And then there is the second portion, which is the interior design and construction. So it's ID+C. These are primarily focused on interior projects such as retail, offices, and hospitality. So those are really projects that you might not have any site work, but you're working in an existing building and doing some renovation projects there. Third is an existing building and operation and maintenance. So those are also very similar market sectors to the BD+C, so the building design and construction pathway. Existing buildings operation and maintenance pathway is really the best for projects undergoing some improvement work or with little to no construction. There's also LEED for Homes pathway, as well as neighborhood development in cities. So within LEED, we are monitored and reviewed by a third-party verifier, which is the GBCI, and that is the Green Business Certification Incorporated. And so they are a third-party entity that will do all of the third-party reviews at a design phase and then at the end of substantial completion for a construction phase, making sure all the documentation has been prepared correctly and are meeting the intent of the various categories. LEED, again, is a whole design, construction, and performance-based project that really focuses on transportation and location, your sustainable sites, water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, material and resources, and indoor environmental quality, as well as innovative design pathways. So as we kind of go through the rest of the slides, you'll see pretty common categories throughout these various certifications. So in order to achieve LEED certification, a project must adhere to a required prerequisites, which within each one of those 7 categories. And it also has to hit certain point systems. So it is based also on prescriptive pathway. And the point systems are 40 points is the minimum out of 110. And so it's typically classified as certified, silver, gold, and platinum levels. Certified is the lowest level for certification, and then platinum being the highest with 80 points or higher. Just as an example for how the point systems or structures are, within those categories, there's credits that can be achieved. So for example, under location and transportation, if our project designates 5% of our total parking to electrical vehicle charging stations, the project could achieve 1 point. So each strategy has a different point system assigned and is weighted differently. Right. And within LEED, the only on-site requirement at this time is going to be the commissioning agent. LEED at this point in time as well does not require recertification of any kind for the building design and construction, as well as the interior design and construction, but it does require recertification for your existing buildings or that O&M pathway. LEED also ties directly with, as Michael had mentioned earlier, ties directly in with Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and is a tool after certification has been achieved to report water and energy use for over 5 years, once the building has been occupied for that 12-month time frame. As you'll notice with all of these different certification pathways, they all can have specific targets to help if a client or a project does need to meet those ESG goals. So each one of these pathways really can help support those and communicate and create that transparency for the client. So for LEED, we're currently on version 4 with options to update for version 4.1. And we are in a current development currently for version 5, which will be released in a couple years. That's really going to hone in on this whole decarbonization requirements and really looking at the Paris Climate Accord for 2030 and 2050 targets. And, you know, those align really well with the various, like the state of New York codes and other local jurisdictions. The next certification we would like to discuss is on the well building standard. This one is more focused on your health and comfort of your occupants. So it's really looking at those quality of your space. So the quality of air, quality of water, light, thermal comfort, sound, or your acoustics. So it's really looking at how to keep that occupant healthy and to also be productive in those various strategies. So this is a little different than how the LEED or other certification pathways look at with that reduction of energy or reduction of water and waste. We're really focused in on those interior spaces within that, within the building. So well is relatively new in comparison to other rating systems. International Well Building Institute developed and launched the well building rating system in 2013-2014 timeframe. And it is also reviewed by the same third-party reviewer, the GBCI, which is linked directly with LEED. There's also all these various overlaps and streamlined pathways with specific to LEED, but then also with some other certifications that we are going to be discussing today. WELL is a very rigorous science-based and monitoring-based platform. So it does require annual data reporting as well as on-site testing, in addition to recertification every 3 years. So really having that on-site testing is verifying all of those strategies that we put in place for the during the design phase, during the construction phase, or what's currently if you're in an existing building. And it's really going on that site, testing for the air parameters, testing for water parameters, and making sure that we meet those qualifications. And again, that the space that we're working in is meeting those strategies. So very similar to LEED, can be applied to various market sectors, both new and existing projects, as well as community and at-scale projects. WELL is comprised of 10 different concepts. So as we've mentioned, air, water, nourishment, light, movement, thermal comfort, sound, materials, mind, and community. One thing to keep in mind with this third party, or with this certification pathway, is the key stakeholders look just a little different than a LEED process. So there will need to be engagement if there's any food vendors, such as a commercial kitchen or things like that on site. But it also looks at your facilities and your building engineers. How is the project being operated? How is it being processed? And what are those policies in place? Is there a Legionella plan or an emergency response plan? They also have quite a few different coordinations with an HR department. So for those employees within that space, what are their benefits for mental health or for sick and maternity or paternity leave? They focus a lot also on various community and inclusion policies as well. So, so with that rating system, again, WELL has quite a few different crosswalk tools that can help streamline approaches. So if your project's going after various certification pathways such as LEED or Green Globes, it can overlap and really help streamline and benefit the project overall. So with WELL, it also supports very heavily on the ESG goals. And we are also currently on version 2 for WELL, and it has quarterly updates are issued. For WELL specifically, they do have discounts for those various market sectors, such as those nonprofits that we had discussed earlier. Okay. The next item is certification pathways Fitwell certification. This was developed by the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, so the CDC, as well as the General Services Administration in 2016. So another newer well building pathway. So again, this one is really focused on, I like to see it as, it's focused as a link between the LEED and the WELL certification platforms. So really still honing in on that health of the occupancy and the wellness and comfort of the occupancy, but also looking at equity opportunities, safety, community building, as well as specific design strategies. Design strategies such as like showcasing a central staircase to utilize instead of using the elevators on your daily walk up to your office. So Fitwell, again, can be used across many different market sectors, and it can be done for new or existing projects. Fitwell is really great where it does not have any minimum requirements or prerequisites or preconditions that you have to meet. It is very flexible within to help cater towards your specific project. Fitwell had a vision of impacting health within all buildings, regardless of budget, size, year built, or location. So it's really helps to accommodate many different market sectors and pricing too. This one is fairly affordable from a certification side. As LEED and WELL, and as you'll see for most of these certifications, there's typically a scorecard or a checklist that you'd go through and walk through each one of those requirements or strategies that would require to be filled out and completed for that process of being towards the certification. There are 7 main categories or factors that go into the Fitwell certification process. So really honing in on your surrounding community and health impact, morbidity and absenteeism reduction, your social equity and vulnerable population support, and then the sense of well-being and healthy food access, safety promotion, as well as physical activity and endorsements. Fitwell is scored by 1, 2, or 3 stars, so it's a little different than the point system and level of certification that Lead and Well under GBCI follow. And it is all based on a percentage and weighted score based off of those 7 different categories. Similar to Well, the key stakeholders also have that engagement with facilities or a food vendor, HR department, and furniture vendors too. Fitwell does require recertification every 3 years, but it does not require any mandatory ongoing reporting or on-site testing. There are options, but again, not mandatory. And then we're currently under the V3 version that had just been released earlier this year. So as Michael had pointed out, the path 2 is also for Energy Star. And so again, high level for the Energy Star compliance. It is a free program that you can verify through your portfolio manager online tool. It focuses on that performance and operation for what that energy reduction, what your overall energy use and consumptions are, and it is something that is, as Michael had said, it's based off of a performance base of 75 out of 100 or higher, and really based on those peer projects. So it's all based off of the same similar use type, construction age, as well as location. This does require that recertification annually, and it does require some on-site testing to verify your CO2 levels and light levels. So, and it will need to have a professional engineer or registered architect to sign off on that application. So another pathway for certification is called Green Globes. This is very similar to the LEED standard and then BRAM, which we'll also talk about here soon. The Green Globes program was developed by the Green Building Initiative, or GRI, and was originally started in the US and Canada. It was developed specifically for federal for verifying compliance with federal buildings, and it is mandated per an executive order, the 13834 Efficient Federal Operations, part of the federal guiding principles pathway. With Green Globes, project types can include new construction, additions, renovations, and existing buildings. Typically, they are commercial office spaces, healthcare, mixed use, multifamily residential are those pathways. The strategies that we really look at for Green Globes are going to be your project management, site, energy, water efficiency, materials, and indoor air quality. So again, very similar to what we had seen previously under the LEED certification. To achieve Green Globe certification, a building must meet a minimum of 35% of 1,000 point threshold. There's customized approach, so it is very tailored. It can be tailored towards your project, and it does not require any recertification or ongoing reporting, but it does require a third-party assessor during the construction phase to verify that the strategies have been met. The scoring for Green Globes is based off of a globe. So they are 1 globe for that 35%, so that minimum threshold, 2 globes, 55% or higher, and then 3 globes is that 70%, and 4 globes is that 85 to 100% out of those 1,000 points available. Currently, the version is V2009. All right, next is BREEAM. BREEAM stands for Building Research Establishment Environmental Assessment Method. And it was developed in the UK and actually had been, it is one of the first green building rating systems that were ever developed. So it is actually 40 years old and was developed in the UK. LEED and Green Globes actually were based off of BREEAM. BREEAM is just starting, even though it has been around for a long time in the European markets, it is still relatively new in the United States markets. It's starting to be more and more popular. We are seeing it more, especially on the East Coast. But it is a very high performing sustainable projects. It does support those different project types, very similar to LEED and BREEAM and and it has looks at like the commercial and mixed use, renovations and additions, communities, and also infrastructure. They do have a single family pathway called the home quality mark as well. So they're just similar to LEED for homes. There is the single family opportunity as well. Within BREEAM, some of those key areas that we focus on during a design and construction, and then once it's performance and operated, there's 10 strategies that BREEAM follows, and they're based off of management, health and well-being, energy, transportation, water, materials, waste, land use, pollution, and innovation. The scoring is on pass, very good, excellent, and outstanding. So again, this weighted point system, the energy target is not based off of like an ASHRAE standard. It's actually based off of more of your regional standards of where all of your projects, how they're hitting within that market sector based on what energy sources are being contributed to your project. And so it's a much more rigorous method to review, especially on the energy side, than I would say on a LEED side. Again, this one does need a third-party assessor. It is reviewed by a BREEAM assessor, both the documentation phase as well as the on-site. So there will be an on-site requirement at the end of substantial completion. And then the next certification pathway is NGBS. So that is the National Green Building Standard. And this is monitored and developed by Home Innovation Research Labs. NGBS difference ensures that no matter what the certification level, the home is green in all aspects. So it looks at energy efficiency, indoor air quality, and how that home relates to the surrounding communities and amenities. The project type for NGBS is strictly just your single family and your multifamily homes for whether they're new or renovated construction. Most of the time that multifamily homes is for this certification pathway that we've seen is typically about that 5 to 4 stories or lower. It is comprised very similar of the same categories as we've mentioned before, really emphasizing that energy, water, your resource or your material resources, lot development, how has that site been evaluated, and then operation and maintenance of how is this being maintained, what type of products are we using once it is occupied, what are some standard procedures, and then also those indoor environmental quality aspects. So looking at thermal comfort, glare control, things like that. One thing to keep in mind with NGBS, within those 6 categories, each category has to meet a certain level of criteria in order to move up. So you can't just have excel at just energy efficiency and not hit those certain thresholds for the other 5 remaining. You must have all of them hit a certain threshold. Scoring is based on bronze, silver, gold, and emerald. And this one does need, very similar to other multifamily or homes certifications, it does require a third-party assessor. So at least 2 times during the construction phase. So one, typically at that framing stage prior to that drywall and those walls kind of closing in, and then the next one would be at the substantial completion. The next one is going to be your Living Building Challenge, and this is monitored by your International Living Future Institute, and it is also reviewed by that program as well. So very similar project types as the other whole building certification pathways. So, and this certification system is a very, it advocates for that transformation in the design. It really looks at kind of that living, breathing machine of a building, looking at that restorative, regenerative, and resilient design as well. So it takes it strategies to another level that is going above and beyond kind of your standard design best practices. Very similar, it's based off of those 7 categories, similar to the place: energy efficiency, water efficiency, material and resource use, health and happiness, which is equivalent to like our indoor air quality, again, lighting quality, all of those noise quality. Also focuses on equity and then beauty, or the aesthetics of the building. This project pathway or certification pathway does require at a minimum of 20 requirements that you have to hit in order to meet a full certification. This is a little interesting too, like where you have to, the certification, you provide all your different strategies during the design phase and construction phase, but then you can't receive certification until a minimum of 12 months post occupancy, where there's continuous monitoring and on-site visits and testing. And then depending on where those scores land, you can receive out of a 5-tier system or an option. So there's the 0 carbon option, 0 energy, core green building certification, or pedal certification, and living building. And so currently we are utilizing version 4. Oops. All right, so FIAS, or Passive House Certification, is also monitored and developed by FIAS. FIAS is a technical committee, and Building Science Corporation developed the standard a little over, it has been around for several years now, and they worked in the partnership with the U.S. Department of Energy, Building America grant. So this does incorporate several different opportunities, such as the DOE's Zero Energy Ready Home Protocol, and really focusing in on those energy efficient designs through passive design, durability, and resiliency. This pathway does require a minimum HERS rater that had been trained by the FIAS group, and it has to have, once the HERS rater has been on site, typically a passive house project does assist with like a ResNet PERS index score, as well as Energy Star certification, and it also aligns with the EPA Indoor Air Plus label. So with this pathway, it is pretty unique where you can actually gain multiple different certifications under this one pathway. So it really helps support various opportunities. Passive house used to just be on residential, so either your multifamily or your single family homes, but now they do have a commercial pathway opportunity for both new construction and renovation opportunities. So part of that passive conservation looks, we really look at the radiation or control glazing, your shading or daylight strategies, really looking and honing in on that, on your envelope for air tightness, and also with that thermal control and high performance control for reducing your heating and cooling demands. So with passive house, it does allow for electrification readiness, and really as well as like electrical vehicle charging stations, and really starts to align with some of the decarbonization goals. Enterprise Green Communities is the only national green building program created and for the affordable housing sector. So their primary goal is to advance the racial equity through green building. So very, very community oriented. There's a collaboration between developers, investors, builders, policymakers, and healthcare practitioners that had all gone into the research for this pathway. The third party online reviewer is by the Enterprise Green Community group, and it is also very similar to what we had just discussed for NGBS Green Pathway, as well as Lead for Homes. So with Enterprise Green Communities, we're really looking at the integration of design approaches that give residents a voice and in the design process. So really having that full integrated design from start to finish. It does create a path of zero energy with strategies to help move closer to zero emissions. It also helps create healthy living practices within your home, creating that ample ventilation for better airflow, and then your also for water standards, making sure that we meet certain criteria and policy requirements. With this, the scoring is based off of 40 points. For new construction projects, there's a different point threshold for other projects. And it is dependent on that project specifically. So, and again, this really applies to those affordable housing projects. All right. So I just wanted to summarize. I know I just went through quite a bit of information. Again, they were very high level. Each one of those certification pathways has can help benefit projects for a more streamlined approach to help reach those decarbonization goals or your health and occupant goals. Each one of these pathways do have different opportunities where they might need an energy model or a commissioning as part of those team members. But again, we really want to consider several different things when we're working with our owners or with new project teams, is really understanding what are our overall goals or priorities for those projects as we move forward, and really creating that feasibility study of which system aligns best. And then also with each one of those certification pathways, there is a certain timeline. So schedule, there's some that can take up to a year for the certification pathway. Others like Fitwell can be a quicker turnaround, where it could be around 8 to 12 weeks from a starting point for an existing building to go through certification. So it really all just depends. And having that open communication and establishing those goals up front will really help help move that decision forward. So, and with that, we want to thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back over to Melissa.
Well, thanks so much, Michelle.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so if you do have any questions, please either feel free to put those in the chat or you can raise your hand. And I guess, Susan, is there anything else?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Melissa had to say at the beginning is we will be sending out the slide deck and the recording link to a recording of the presentation as soon as we get that posted. And just thank you again. And if you have any questions on these, like as I think Michael mentioned at the beginning, like the NORESCO team is available to help, particularly as you all get further into your designs. And just again, thank you all very much for attending.
Thank you.